in a pop-up box, so look out for that, and then you can save it to your computer. Similarly, there is a certificate of attendance that you can download, and it's a PDF form. So when you download the file, it's a form where you enter your name and the date at which you completed this training and your email address. And then within the form, there's a button that says Submit. You click the Submit button, and then it transmits to me, and I receive your certificate of attendance. So please do that on the honor system if you've attended today's briefing. Finally, I can see the attendance roster filling up down there, so thank you. We have really good compliance with that pod. So thanks for putting your email address and your organization in the attendance roster. Next to the attendance roster is the Q&A pod, and that's where I ask that you put all of the questions that you have for Colonel Salmon into that block. Colonel Salmon is being assisted today by Lieutenant Colonel Tanya Wahlberg, and she'll be answering a lot of your questions during Colonel Salmon's presentation, and then we'll also take questions and address some questions for the group at the very end of this presentation.
Thank you very much. May I do a sound check, please, to make sure you can all hear me okay? How is that? Is that better? But now there's an echo. Down. How is that? Multiple guests, it says it's better. Okay, well, we'll just go ahead, and if you need to go ahead and turn up your microphone, please do. If you continue to have problems hearing me, I will readjust the volume in a couple of places that I can try to get to on the computer. But I want to thank you up front for joining me on this wonderful journey through WHIMS. I think that it's going to be a very valuable hour that we're going to spend together, and I want to thank my team for assisting me to put this together. Lieutenant Colonel Tanya Wahlberg is definitely a subject matter expert, and she is going to assist me through this entire process. And Sarah Ryan was wonderful to help get this Aspire Series presentation established, and thank her very much. The one person that was unable to join us today is the Nurse Methods Analyst Consultant, Colonel Linda Fisher, but I want you to all know that she is also a subject matter expert on WHIMS, and she is available for questions. She was just unable to attend today. The reason that we went down the road that I'm going to go down with you today on WHIMS as a WHIMS 101 is because we recognize that there is a diverse number of people and a diverse audience out there who may not even understand how nursing workload is captured, how nursing staffing is performed, and we wanted to establish a baseline with all of our partners out there amongst the MedCom. So I'm actually going to start this presentation with some real basic concepts of nursing staffing, build upon that to show you WHIMS, and then go into a whole lot of decision-making pieces that come from WHIMS. But I wanted this opportunity to make sure that, oh, we can't hear me. So there are several of you that are saying we can't hear me at all. If there's anything that I can do. Okay, how is that? Okay, how is that? Okay, how is that? Mute my speakers. Okay, let's try that. Did that help? Worse. Oh, ain't life fun. Sarah, do you have any suggestions?
Now?
Thank you for stopping that, Colonel.
Well, I'm sure trying. So there's definitely something that I don't know how to fix on here. Any suggestions for me? Because I do want to make sure we had that fixed before we go on.
Might be on just a touch, Colonel. Still there. You can turn off the second microphone this time, and that was very helpful.
Mute my speaker. Okay, how's that? It still has the high. I'm not sure what to do, guys. Yeah, see if Colonel Polk can help. It's the reverb from my speakers.
Fantastic.
Okay, let me try that. How's
You're
that?
great.
Okay, very good. Excellent. Okay, so we will start there, and I hope that you heard my my greeting, and I will just continue on from there. Hopefully you can hear me now. I'm looking to make sure everybody's okay. Woohoo! Life is good. We're okay now. Thank you very much. Okay, I had some folks in my room who were getting up to see if they could get me help. So, yay! We will continue. So, thank you for joining me, and we will continue on with the presentation. I want you to know that there are follow-on presentations to this WMSNi 101 that will be occurring through the Aspire series presentation method as well. One on Manpower, one on WMSNi. I see one on a 2.0 that I have already scheduled in May, and then we're going to have a WMSNi 3.0 presentation through the subject matter expertise of Tad Gao on the case management module that's being added to WMSNi. So there will be many more presentations, and so don't feel like you don't have enough that you're going to hear today. This is the basic 101 presentation, and there will be many more opportunities to learn more in-depth information on the WMSNi system. So let's go ahead and get started. One of the biggest things we need to do, well, there it goes, is to discuss what does WMSNi mean to you. Some of you work in resource management, some of you work in MEPers, some of you work at an MTF, some of you work in the regions, you work in all over the MedCom, and you may be saying to yourself, is this valuable for me to be at a WMSNi presentation, and what does this mean to me? And the bottom line is, in our current environment, it absolutely is essential that we have an open and honest communication about the critical inpatient mission. It is the time right now to understand how nursing workload and staffing impact the way we do business, the combat casualty care, all the things that we're doing for a living amongst our whole MedCom. We are looked at right now across the enterprise, the MHS enterprise, in order for us to establish what is our value. They're looking at cost containment. We are looking at ourselves as an operating company model, which is a wonderful thing that we're doing, and we're going to talk a few slides from now on how we're doing the operating company model experience across the inpatient environment. We're reducing variance, we're increasing efficiencies. We're under scrutiny in our inpatient settings. The small hospital study, the modernization study are looking at our inpatient environments to make sure that we're doing things well, that we're doing things in an efficient manner, and that we're providing the wartime skill sustainment training that we need to provide for the combat casualty care mission that we're here for. The other thing that has happened in the last few years is that there's a requirement to justify our staff using workload. We can no longer use historical numbers. We can no longer use, this is what I think. We can no longer use, well, I have the physical beds for this, so therefore I need this much staff. It has to be based on workload. That's the point. The bottom line also is that we are losing inpatient nursing TDA requirements today. We are facing a loss across our enterprise of nursing TDA requirements, and we're going to talk about that. It may be that we're right-sizing. It may be that our workload is now very transparent and it's very visible, and it's absolutely the right thing to do. But I want everybody on this team to understand that we have to go with the workload and what the workload shows, and so data quality is very important, and everybody understanding the importance of data quality at all your levels is absolutely key. So you cannot afford not to care about WMSNi in our current environment. So we're going to talk about how we capture inpatient workload and the staffing concepts of our inpatient areas, but I want you also to understand that WMSNi is our current inpatient nursing workload system. It doesn't mean it's the only solution. It means that it's what we currently use, it's what we have established over multiple years of experience. It is a very good, solid system. But it doesn't mean it's the end-all be-all, and there are a lot of other things that could come down the pike in the future years that could very well do the same type of thing. As long as the concepts are sound, we're absolutely open to another system coming down the road. So let's talk about the concepts in a couple of slides from now that are very key. We're going to talk about staffing and workload concepts. We're going to look at the operating company model in inpatient nursing. We're going to look at WMSNi concepts and responsibilities, look at a couple screenshots so that y'all are familiar with what basically it looks like when the nurses are inputting their classifications on a patient. We're going to talk about the value of WMSNi, talk about some data and reports that you can look at all different levels, the future of WMSNi. I have some references at the end as well. And we're going to talk a little bit at the end. Maybe we'll have 30 minutes left over for you to ask questions that we can share with the group. The bottom line, too, is that although we're looking at data here, we're also talking about quality care delivery. We must never forget that at the root of everything we do, we have to satisfy our patients. We have to provide quality patient care. We have to remember that patient safety is of the utmost importance. And we have to sync that with our data and our workload and our staffing concepts. Okay? Alrighty. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the basics, concepts of inpatient nurse staffing. The reason why I started here is that I get asked a lot of questions from folks that aren't familiar with nursing. And let's focus on the left hand for a while. These are the not quite right approaches to inpatient nurse staffing. I get asked the question all the time, why can't we just say this DRG is equatable to this nursing intensity? Why can't a an RWP, which is a relative weighted product, equate to nursing workload? And the answers to both of those is a DRG, say for example, it's a patient that has a COPD. The nurse intensity of a COPD patient that's 20 years old, up walking and talking, and has no other comorbidities would be completely different than a nursing intensity of a patient that has the same DRG but has lots of different comorbidities and is aphasic and requires you to assist them up out of bed. There's just huge differences in the nursing intensity of the work. You can't just go by a DRG or a diagnosis or a clinical diagnosis of any kind. The same thing with an RWP. You can't say that every RWP is the same and it equates to nursing workload. The same thing for minutes and hours of service. We look at workload differently across our facilities, and I recognize that there's a whole team of people that look at MEPRs and look at EASE-4 and look at M2 and some of those mechanisms for looking at how costs are stepped down across our organization, and they actually look at minutes and hours of service for those cost centers, and that's done by length of stay. But that doesn't equate to the nursing workload in those work centers. That only equates to the length of time that those patients were physically there, not the intensity of the care that was required for the patient that was there. The other thing it doesn't equate to is historical census. Now it may, if you have a very stable patient load that are always requiring the same thing, it may be very close to the care that you needed last month, to the care you need this month. Very dependent upon the stability of your patient load and if they're exactly the same all the time. But if you have a fluctuating patient load, or each patient is different in their care requirements, or you have different types of surgeries that you do, different medical treatments that you do, then your historical census will not equal your staffing requirements in the future. You cannot use patient to staff ratios either, because every patient is different. The patient's not a patient, the patient's not a patient. It's such a big deal to everybody to understand that. Every patient requires a different nursing care. Physical bed capacity does not equal staffing requirements. Many people have asked me, why can't I just delete 5 beds and delete a certain amount of nurses because I deleted 5 beds. And so here's the answer to that. Number one, if those 5 beds were empty beds, it didn't matter at all. Number two, if those 5 beds were patients that, okay, let me back up. If you had 15 beds and they were filled with 15 patients who required 100 nursing care hours, and you took away 5 beds and the 10 patients that were left required 100 nursing care hours, you still require 100 nursing care hours. So now you require the same amount of nurses for the 10 patients than you did for the 15. Taking away the 10 beds didn't make a difference because it was all about the nursing care requirement for the patients, not the bed. Okay? People really don't need to look at beds as the final answer. It is about the patient that's in the bed. Okay? Each patient's not the same. All right, so we've covered the ones on the left. Now let's go to the ones on the right. This is the better approach to how we should look at inpatient nurse staffing requirements. Each inpatient has a unique nursing care requirement. And by the way, each day, each shift, that requirement might change. You might have a code one shift. You might have a fresh post-op one shift, and the next shift they're much better and don't need as much intense care. One day to the next, the same patient can require different nursing care. Every patient is different, and every day is different for every patient. Inpatient care is delivered by a team. So that's important for everybody to understand as well. That inpatient care is delivered by the whole team, not by one nurse. So we have to look at this in a holistic way. Those nursing care hours are delivered by a team of nurses, not by one. Nursing care hours must be measured in actual time that the nurse spends providing that care, not necessarily how long the patient's on the floor, how sick they are, or their diagnosis. And I want to talk about the statement of how sick they are, because there's a lot of people who would like to say that the acuity of a patient is how you should staff. Acuity is how we used to term our nursing care hour requirements, and we went away from using the word acuity because it got misinterpreted. It got misinterpreted because people interpreted acuity to mean how sick they were. So let me put it to you this way. You could have somebody who was in the final throes of cancer, who, they were on their deathbed, who could require less nursing care than a fresh post-op patient, but they were sicker, okay? So it's up to us to understand that what we're really talking about is not how sick they are, but how much time and how much care they require from a nursing perspective. The last couple bullets basically talk about staffing requirements fluctuate as the patient demand fluctuates. So I was asked a question just a few weeks ago, why is it so difficult for you to determine how much staff you're going to need on a floor? But when we really sat down and talked, this individual and I, when I asked them the question, well, how many patients am I going to have tomorrow? How many surgeries are you going to do? Who is going to have a critical reaction to a drug, and who's going to code? They were unable to answer me that, so then I was unable to answer them how much staff we were going to need. The bottom line is that you have to have a basic minimal level to even open the doors to put the patients there. We understand that, and you understand that. We all understand there's a basic minimal level. Above that, we have to have a mechanism to determine the patient demand for the nursing staff. And WMSNi does that for us, and I want to show you that today, because nursing care hour requirements equate to the staffing requirements, and that's the point of what we're going to talk about today. Okay? So if y'all have any questions that you want us to cover, make sure that you're asking them so that Colonel Wahlberg can take them down and we can talk about them at the end. Alrighty. So let's go ahead and talk further about the inpatient operating company model, because I think these concepts are very important before we move forward. And I'm going to spend just a few minutes on this slide to talk about why we did it this way and where we're headed. So because we really needed to get a handle on what we were doing across the inpatient enterprise, I've worked really hard with a whole team of subject matter experts to include PA&E, lots of great folks across the nursing community and the physician community and the MSc community. Just some really good work has occurred where we have standardized inpatient MEPRS codes across the enterprise. The unit nomenclature is now the same as well. So we used to have literally hundreds of different MEPRS codes, and we could not get at the data because everybody was unique. Now we have a med-surg ward as a med-surg ward as a med-surg ward, and we can actually look at everybody in the same fashion and determine what your data is. We found a way to actually look at operating beds the same across the enterprise. Bottom line, we couldn't get to occupancy rates until we defined an operating bed. There was a time when we only counted physical beds and we reported them as operating beds because we thought we understood operating beds, but what was happening is we were really reporting physical beds. An operating bed is a constructed, equipped, and staffed bed ready and available for inpatient care. That's the bottom line. It's a staffed bed. So that's important for us to understand what an operating bed is. So you might have a physical bed capacity of 200, but you're only staffed to take care of 80 patients. If you filled that bed up to 200, you would have had a mass casualty situation. You only staffed to fill maximum of 80 beds. So really your operating bed capacity was 80. But you had a physical bed capacity of 200, which are two different questions, okay? The other thing we've done across our enterprise, which is a wonderful example of the operating company model, is the patient caring touch system. So if y'all aren't familiar with that, there's a whole nother briefing that can be done on that by those subject matter experts. It's a wonderful system. We've established the inpatient manpower model, which is again across the enterprise the exact same way. We look at manpower across our enterprise. We're going to talk about that later in this briefing. The inpatient raters include nursing information as well as other information from M2 and the network. It's a wonderful way that now we're looking at our enterprise of inpatient so that we can look across and see where we need to target opportunities to improve and where we can praise those that are doing extremely well and get a good look at how we're doing across our enterprise. We've also standardized the WMSNi nursing sub-task codes across our enterprise. That was also key because we at one time were simply putting in 88888 in our work center task codes, and we were not paying attention to defining what we were really doing with our time on the inpatient setting, and now we are. The last 2 years, y'all have done a terrific job actually just defining what our nurses are doing with their time, and it's going to make a huge difference showing what nursing requirements we really have on the floor and what our nurses are really doing. So thank you for all your hard work with WMSNi because that's key. The other thing we've done with WMSNi is we're using that in the inpatient staffing efficiency PBM-IRIS metric. We're using the WHIMS-I and the WMSNi, direct care time in WHIMS-I, and the direct care time only in WMSNi to put them together apples to apples, and the goal is to be between 90 and 120% staffing levels on your inpatient units. That's a forcing function for data quality, data accuracy, and it's the transparency that we're looking for across all that we do to show where we need to focus our efforts, what areas still need to be working on their data quality, and how we're doing with our staffing. If we don't know how we're doing, we can't fix anything. So that's what this is all about. And of course, in big red bold letters here is WHIMS-I, which we're going to talk about. We have a standard, constant mechanism to do WHIMS-I across our enterprise. It's the same everywhere. It's exactly the same at every MTF, whether you're large, small, or not. So it's very important that we all know that it is the common operating picture for how we capture workload and how we do staffing for inpatient areas across our enterprise. Okay? Alrighty, so let's talk about WHIMS-I. WHIMS-I has been around for, no kidding, like 30 years. So back in the 80s, we were using WHIMS-I in the Nurse Corps and the Navy, and it was decided to be a joint manpower staffing standard for all three services back in 1989. So this is an excerpt from headquarters DAFM that I just wanted to show you guys. I literally cut and pasted it on here so you could see it. We used to have this across all of our services. And then over the years, it became just an Army-led, an Army-funded program. So we're going to talk at the end about some MHS ways forward when we get there. So recent history, just in the last 4 years, I wanted just to talk to you a little bit about what we've been doing with WHIMS. We've done a whole lot of stuff in the last 2010. We actually put it on the internet. We consolidated the servers. We did a whole lot of time and motion studies and updated definitions. We really worked on the labor and delivery module, which we're not going to touch on a whole lot today because it is a little bit different, and I think it needs its own separate presentation to really give it justice because it does have some uniquenesses about it. And so Colonel Murray, who is the nursing consultant for that area, would probably do a much better job than I talking about those LAD specific things. So maybe we can talk her into doing an Aspire series for LADs. But in 2012, at the end of 2012, we redid the staff mix, and I will show you a picture of that a little bit later on. Again, we did the inpatient MEPRS code standardization. We established a program management cell so that the system itself could be sustained with the right subject matter expertise that you submitted, because it is an IMIT type system as well as it's a clinical component system that we care about a lot, but it also has IT components that we weren't a subject matter expert on as nurse methods analysts. So the submitted program management cell is essential to our success. Inpatient staffing efficiency metric, we talked about that a little bit. We'll talk about it a little bit later. We also revalidated the indirect care multiplier, which we'll talk about. We published a regulation that you have also attached. I think Sarah was going to provide that for you as an attachment. It is already a little outdated, but it is dated August 2013. There's still a lot of good information in there, but it does already need to be updated with all the new stuff we're doing. And then now we're working on outpatients in the inpatient environment, which is WMSi 2.0. So I'll be talking about that a little bit later as well. So at this exact moment, we cover 23 bedded facilities across the Army, including SAMC and Belvoir, which are Army-led facilities. Walter Reed is very interested. Walter Reed National Military Medical Center at Bethesda is very interested in coming on board, but we're still working on the fact that they are in a Navy firewall IMIT situation, and we haven't been able to crack that code yet, but we are working on that. So hopefully Walter Reed National Military Medical Center will be on board within the next year. The WMSi servers are located centrally. Again, everybody uses the same MEPRS codes. We're all using the same nursing workload and patient level data input. It's a web-based application. These nursing care hours are used as the basis for earning your requirements in your Manpower model. Bottom line is WMSi nursing care hours equal your requirements on your TDA on the inpatient setting. We have defined operational beds. They're updated quarterly, and they're displayed in WMSi. And we've also started an inpatient nursing dashboard, which is located in CMS. If you go under CMS, go under Documents, and then go under Nursing, you will find FY13 inpatient dashboard. You can go ahead and download that. It's a spreadsheet. You can drill down from your region to your MTF to your ward. We have all of your data in there from WMSi. Lieutenant Colonel Wahlberg, Major Korwicki, and several of their teammates worked really hard on putting this dashboard together so that you don't have to guess at what your nursing workload is. It is transparent. It's right there for you. It is at your fingertips. Then the 14 is also on there. They update it monthly for you to see. Okay, so it's there for you to look at. These are the MEPRS codes that I talked about. These are all your A MEPRS codes, and these are the ones you needed to standardize to, and you have. I think I only have one MTF out there who's struggling with one MEPRS code. Otherwise, we are 99.9% done with this, and it has been a lot of hard work, and y'all have done a terrific job. It's making a huge difference. And then these are your ICUs, which are the D codes. Okay, so very good job, everybody. But these are the standard MEPRS codes now. We're able to use this to drill down to a lot more fidelity of data, which is helping tremendously. So thank you very much. So we really needed to just go through some concepts with WHIMS in case those of you that are not nurses don't understand how this is done. The process begins with a daily classification of each patient. The nurses actually go into the computer and they pick critical indicators that are applicable to each and every patient, and it's done at least once a day and can be done 3 times a day if they need to. As the patient is admitted and the plan of care is determined, whether it's physician orders, nursing initiated orders, there's a plan of care for that patient. That nurse needs to then go in and classify the patient in WHIMS-I. Then, as that condition changes and the nursing care hour requirements for that patient changes, that plan of care changes, they can go back in and update the classification. So if the original classification was 10 nursing care hours, and now they're going to surgery and I need to put in a Foley catheter, I need to start an IV, now I need to go in and put in a new classification, now that nursing care hour requirement might be 14. You would want to make that additional WHIMS-I classification entry because you have just earned yourself 4 more nursing care hours, therefore, over time, earning yourself more nurses. Okay? So I encourage people, yes, you have to get them classified as soon as they're admitted, and you know their plan of care. And then, once there's a change in that, you go in and you reclassify them. Okay? At least once a day is required. So each of those critical indicators is associated with a certain number of minutes or hours of nursing care hours required. So IV meds, vital signs, blood products, getting them up out of bed, etc. Those are examples of critical indicators. Each of those were time and motion studied over the years. We just redid some of them in 2010 to make sure that they were still valid, that we were keeping up with the times, that we remembered that there's IV pumps and PCA pumps and all those things that are different from it used to be. So those are valid. The PhD folks were very involved in making sure that all that was done in a reliable and valid study. So these time and motion studies are the core of how those times were determined. Another key concept here is that there's definitions. Let me go one more and I'm going to come back. Okay. These are an example of a definition that then I'm going to go back to those other slides. So when I talked about a critical indicator, this is one, for example, to start an IV. It's worth 13.9 minutes, time and motion studied. On average, that's how long it took somebody to do it. This is what they did. Time to place the equipment at the bedside, wash their hands, apply the tourniquet, cleanse the site, perform the venipuncture, connect the IV tubing, apply the dressing, secure the catheter, do the time and date and stuff on the dressing, insert the tube to the pump, set the flow rate on the pump, record the INO, remove the equipment. No kidding. All of that is included, okay, as an example of the definition. In WHIMS-I, you can click on this definition when you go into the classifications and see exactly what's included in each of these critical indicators, okay? So there should be no question about what's included in all of these, all right? So, as we're talking about putting in each of these critical indicators, we recognized early on through the WHIMS-I concepts 20 years ago that the hands-on direct care is only part of what we do. There's also the other stuff like doing shift report, communicating with the doctor, answering telephones, the documentation, the doing rounds with the physicians. All of those things that we call indirect care requirements are equally important. It's not only the time that you spend with hands-on. So there is a unit type level indirect care multiplier value added to those direct care time requirements from the critical indicators. Then the system calculates the total together to give you the recommended number and mix of personnel that you need. Okay? Gives you a total of nursing care hours, which we use a lot of places. We use total nursing care hours from WHIMS-I in a lot of different data sets, and I'll show you some of those later. But it uses those to tell you the staff you need. Okay? Nursing care hours are your nursing workload in the inpatient setting. Not minutes of service, not hours, not length of stay, not DRGs, not RWPs, not RVUs. It's nursing care hours in WHIMS-I, period. All right, so this is how you determine inpatient requirements. Those direct care critical indicators we talked about, your indirect care stuff that we do. The fixed requirements, which are your CNOIC and your NCOIC and your ward clerk. And then there's a little bit of population adjustment that the Manpower model includes, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So there's the example I gave you. So this is the indirect care modifier we talked about when we talked about the importance of all those things we do that have to be done in order to provide safe patient care, like documentation and answering the phones and talking to the physicians in the hallway, etc. We redid the current indirect care modifier. They did studies, the PhD folks came back and helped us out, and we worked on this across the whole entire enterprise. We looked at small hospitals, large hospitals. Your teams actually did these on the floors and collected the data for us in March of 2013. So for every 1 hour, so let's take this med-surg example. I have an example on the next slide. For every 1 hour that you earn in direct patient care from a critical indicator, we earn 0.658 additional hours of indirect care time. So another way for me to say this is 10 hours of direct care time from the critical indicators gives you 16.58 hours of total time. So when you see on a report or a data sheet that you've earned 16.58, that means total. That means direct care plus the indirect care multiplier. That patient requirement was 16.58. Out of a 24-hour period, that particular patient required 16.58 hours of nursing care. Does not mean by one nurse. It means by the nursing team, and it was for a 24-hour period. Okay, this is a sample classification. This isn't a perfect one. This is just one that I decided I would show you because it fit on one page and it had a lot of different pieces to it, so I thought it would be a good one for us to at least go over. Activities of daily living are ADL category. You can see that on the top, I guess it's the second one to the left. Activities of daily living include your hourly clinical rounds that you are supposed to do on every patient with the patient caring touch system. A lot of nurses ask me that question, and the answer is yes, it is included in the time that you get for your activity of daily living. You can see that this person was fairly intensive. They did neurological checks, they did intake and output every hour, they have them on continuous monitoring. This is an ICU patient. They did BiPAP, they did some individual teaching, they did a couple of venipunctures, they did an EKG, they administered medications, finger sticks, did some lab tests. You can tell that this was a, you know, not an easy patient, but not too hard of a patient, okay? This patient earned 18.47 nursing care hours out of a 24-hour period for their care. Look at the bottom, and you can see the direct care hours were 10.9, but the nursing care hours on the far right, which is your total, which includes the indirect care multiplier, is 18.47. Okay? Alrighty. So let's talk a little bit about the concepts of the nursing team staffing requirements. So the nursing care requirements are based upon workload, plus those select fixed positions we talked about. The workload gives you the nurses that are providing the patient care, and the fixed positions are not based upon that workload. So if you open a ward at all, you get a CNOIC and an NCOIC and a ward clerk because you've got to have your leadership. So all the rest of the nursing staff, though, whether they're a charge nurse, whether they're RNs, whether they're LPNs, whether they're nursing assistants, whomever they are, medics, etc., are earned from the workload, which is WMSNi nursing care hours. There are unique unit type considerations for the mix of those nursing and medics and LPNs, and it differs on whether you're an ICU, you're a med-surg, you're a psych ward, etc. And I have a table that I'm going to show you in a minute on that. So why is this important to you as a staffing tool? Is that they use this information, and I have a 24-hour report that I'm going to show you in a minute where you can really see how it breaks it out. They use it as a shift-to-shift staffing tool. So say, for example, on day shift, I had earned 130 nursing care hours, The 24-hour report in WHIMS-I will tell you what is your shift staffing you need for your evening shift, and what do you need for your night shift. It's going to tell you prospectively what staffing that you need to have for the next shift. Plus, it has captured your workload of the 130 hours that you needed to care for the patients. At an MTF level, the section supervisors and the DCNs can look across the enterprise now at all of that data and say, oh, their workload has gone down over here, so they have an extra nurse that I can shift from this floor to this floor because their workload has gone up. Or next shift, that's what I'm going to do, evening shift, night shift, etc. That's how they can redistribute staff on a daily basis across the enterprise based on their workload for that day. And they can also redistribute staff across the MTF based on a trend analysis of the workload over time, which is how I like to look too at nursing workload. You can look at total nursing care hours per patient day, you could look at averages, you could look at, you know, all kinds of different ways to look at trends across your organization. But on a day-to-day level, you can also look at it as well, okay? So we're also looking at this at a very high level across the enterprise to determine which MTFs need how much staff based on what workload, okay? Using it all across the enterprise. This is that skill mix I talked about, which differs between ICU and med-surg, labor and deliveries, psych wards, etc. We redid this as recently, I think it was October of 2012, as I came into this position. We had the consultants really scrub this and look through their specialty areas, what were the recommendations from all of their resources, and this is what they came up with the ICU with an 80-20 split. The med-surg was 60-40, which is a little different from what it had previously been. This is what we're going to see reflected in our TDA, that there's going to be a 60% RN and 40% paraprofessional mix in med-surg. So these suggested staffing mixes are what we're aiming for. It does not mean that it's got to be exact, because you may not have the exact, like you can't split a body, we get that. But this is the suggested staffing mix, okay? So in our Manpower model, the inpatient nursing Manpower model, we utilize WHIMS-I nursing care hours as the basis for generating the FTE requirements. So bottom line, you've got to have your TDA, you got to know that your TDA requirements are documented for each unit at each MTF and that they're right. So quality data is absolutely key, because that's how you will earn your Manpower requirements. Multiple decisions. Responsibilities. It is very key that everybody understands who is the responsible party for WHIMS-I. Your nursing executive team is absolutely key, both strategic and operational and technical. Okay. The MTF nursing leadership, they're the bottom line. Data accuracy on a daily basis. They have to look at what their staff is doing. They've got to look at the data. They've got to understand the inter-rater reliability testing results. That's the way we know that the data is good, is that they're doing IRRs every month to compare and contrast to be sure that the data is entered accurately and it reflects the real care that was given. Using the schedule in there is very valuable for them at the local level. Ensure that all the clinical staff nurses and leaders understand it. Dimmer's eye accuracy, timely completion, all key components, WHIMS-I responsibilities. Key principles. Again, it's the RN responsibility. You cannot delegate this to anybody else. They have to be responsible for putting in their WHIMS-I. Data quality. Remember that the indirect care modifier accounts for a lot of the care. So if you get questions about things, chances are that it was included in that. Important to read the definitions, okay? Very important. If they miss a classification, they have lost workload. If they miss a classification, they've lost workload. Workload equals staff, period. Okay, let's look at a couple screenshots and then we'll move right along, because I am talking away here. These are some of the WHIMS-I classifications, just to give you an idea what they look like. You could look at these at your leisure. This is what it looks like when they open it. This is a list of non-classified patients. So if CNOIC leaves at the end of the day and there's a whole list of non-classified, they should go back and make sure their nurses are classifying anybody that's not classified. I wanted to focus real quick on the bottom of this 24-hour report. This is the bottom of it, shows you the required nursing care hours. Like this, for example, this says there's 131 nursing care hours, and then to the right it tells you how many required FTEs you need on day shift, evening shift, okay? And it tells you what your scheduled ones if you put it in the schedule. And then where you were low or where you were high, okay? So this is a very valuable tool. They should be using this tool. It should be done every single day. There are also monthly reports that can be used to do the trend analysis to look at how they're doing across time. This is the schedule that they can look at who's on today, and that's also very valuable for them. So let's talk a little bit about the value of WHIMSi. It's an evidence-based decision-making tool. It's quantifiable. It drives data-driven decisions. Again, it's the foundation for a lot of stuff that we do every day. We've got to understand it. These are the strategic and operational applications. And then we've talked a little bit about tactical and local already. But strategically, we're going to go into a little bit of manpower because the manning is huge and we need to understand how we earn our requirements on our TDA. Bottom line is we have got to understand it. Okay, so let's talk about manpower. This is the Army regulation that actually tells us we have to use workload. Manpower levels must be logically developed from workload. Workload will consist of quantitative processes that are credible and accepted by audit agencies and oversight authorities. The process can include manpower surveys, studies, modeling, etc. But work that is not validated will not be performed or resourced. We have to show the workload, and it has to be a quantitative process and be able to be audited, which is WHIMSi. WHIMSi shows the workload that was done, and that's how we earn our bodies. So when you're looking at the inpatient nursing staffing model in Manpower, it takes the WHIMSi, it does a little bit of enrollment-based stuff, it takes those skill mixes that we talked about, and it takes the Army availability factor, which is given to us from the same AR I just referred to. It tells us that the Army availability factor is 1740 hours for a man year. It takes all of those things together to give you the FTEs that you earn. But the basis is the WHIMSi nursing care hours. And then you also get your OIC and your NCOIC, okay? And it also sets a floor of minimal requirements at this time. We may be asked to relook at how we're doing that minimal requirement in the future, and so I wanted to make sure y'all knew that we're going to probably ask to look at that. We don't have the answers yet for that, but it may be coming, okay? So what we've done to try to incentivize everybody to look carefully at their WHIMSi and their DMRSi is to do the PBAM iris metric, where we're looking at DMRSi on one hand, and that DMRSi is direct care, which means we pull out their admin time, their leave, their holidays, the time they spend in training, the time they spend in education. All those things are pulled out, and I have a whole list of things that are include and exclude. So it's the direct care patient time that they're spending on the floor is the DMRSi side of the equation, and then the WHIMSi side of the equation is that time that they're spent doing patient care, which includes the direct and indirect care time that we talked about for nursing care hours. The goal is to be between 90 and 120% on each and every ward. Right now, they're lumping those at the unit type level, so all med-surg wards are lumped into one. If you have a large MTF, you're noticing that all your med-surg wards are lumped into one, all your ICUs are lumped into one. If you have a small MTF and you only have one ICU, then it looks like it's a singular unit. But just so you know, right now it's at the unit type level. At the beginning of this, when we first started, we did it at the higher MTF level. So you guys are noticing a difference between the one when we started and the one that began in August of 2013 at the unit type level. The point to this is it's a forcing function for data accuracy. We really want you guys to know that this is important. So these are just some examples of data that are out there. These are some strategic reports that are available at the MTF level. These are some reporting cubes. There's capacity cube, a patient count cube, a critical indicator cube. These are usually limited to some of us at higher levels of nurse methods analyst skill sets, because we need to make sure that the person who's going into these understands how to use it. There's always a way to pull data that's correct, and if you go in and you try to pull data and you don't know what you're doing, sometimes you only get partial answers or it's skewed, and that doesn't help anybody to have bad data. So some of these are going to be limited, but you should know that they're there, and we can get to them, and we can get all kinds of great information out of the OLAP cubes. The tactical reports are available to you at the MTF level. They should be using these. There's no secrets. They're transparent to everybody, and they should be using them on a daily basis. It makes a huge, big difference if they do. Again, this is looking at some of the dashboards that are available for you to help you out. Do you have too much staff? Don't you? Do you? These are things that will help you. And this just gives you an example of how you can look at things from a monthly perspective. What are your average daily hours that this is across the whole medical command, so you can drill down by region, drill down into each MTF and that kind of thing. So recently we had an inpatient rater that y'all should be aware of that used WHIMS-I for the very first time as one of the components of the briefing to general line. And we thought it was important to bring in WHIMS-I into the picture of the presentation, because it really does show nursing intensity. And so what this shows you, if you'll look on the far left, it gives you the overall facility. And I did black out because I didn't want anybody to get caught up in who's who. I really just want you to focus on the fact that we have this information now. The facility overall is on the left, and then we broke it out by med-surg, we broke it out by ICU, broke it out mother, baby, and behavioral health. The nursing care hours per patient day are the average number of nursing care hours that each of the patients required per day. So the ICUs are running in the 16s and 17s, and we have a few that are high. Some of those that are high, we're asking why. Some of those that are high, we sort of guessed they would be, because they're the really high places that you would think, oh, okay, that makes absolute sense that would be a really high nursing care hour ICU. Some of the places that are low, yeah, okay, that makes sense that those would be a lower intensity one, okay? But what's good about this information is that it's transparent. We're able to show what are their occupancy rates across the enterprise, how busy are they, how intensive work are they doing, where should we be looking at putting our new lieutenants for training, for combat casualty care skills sustainment training. All those things come when we're looking at the data in a transparent fashion. This is another way of looking at it with the M2 data, which groups med-surg and ICU together in DRGs. It also groups OB with NICU. So this is a little bit of a different way of looking at information. And then this is the example MTF of the rater briefing that we did, which shows the med-surg beds. If you'll look at the box, the actual outline of the, it gives you the sum of the operational beds. The green is their average daily patient load. And then the yellow is that 70% occupancy goal that we're heading for, okay? So this particular MTF had 120 or so actual operational beds. They were hovering in the 60s or so for actual average daily patients, and they're not quite meeting the 70% occupancy rate mark. For their staffing levels, if you look to the far right, you'll see that the box is the required, which is their WHIMS-I. The purple is what they had in DMRS-I, and the red, which is the 90 to 120% goal we're aiming for, they actually met it. They were between 90 and 120% staffing levels that entire time, which is way awesome. So this particular MTF did an exceptionally good job those months, keeping their staffing within the range that we were hoping for. So that's just an example of how we're using this data and displaying the data to show the transparency across our enterprise for each and every MTF. Okay? And then here's some more examples for different areas of that MTF. So here's some quick look at how we can look at outliers. This is real data, by the way, ICU versus med-surg, behavioral health, how we're looking at each of the MTFs and where they're falling out, or if they're in the pack, or they're under or over. We're trying to look at each and every location as a whole and then drill down. So this is useful for you to look at in the future. This is the inpatient nursing dashboard that I really want you to make sure you know is available to you. Remember, go into CMS, go into Documents, go into Nursing. You will find FY13, and then you'll find FY14, and it's updated every month, and it is incredibly valuable information for you. No secrets. Okay? So the future of WMSNi. The next thing we're working on is the 2.0. In May, on May 15th, I'm going to be presenting the WMSNi 2.0 Aspire Series presentation, which will go over, unfortunately, massive detail because we need to, about the new screenshots of what it's going to look like so that everybody won't be surprised when 2.0 comes out. What 2.0 will do is to capture those outpatients that we're currently seeing and performing work on in the inpatient environment but have not gotten credit for. Because WMSNi is limited to the inpatients that were entered into CHCS and have a registrar number, we have been unable to capture outpatient work that we have been performing in the inpatient setting by the inpatient nurses. Now we have a way, we cracked the code. I've been working with a lot of really smart people this last year. We've cracked the code. Now there's a way for us to capture the outpatients that are currently being seen in the inpatient environment in exactly the same way we're doing the inpatient WMSNi. We're going to capture these outpatients by nursing care hours using critical indicators. So we're going to earn nursing care hours the same for them as we do the inpatients. Very exciting, and I'm looking forward to doing that presentation in May. So here's an example of what that new screen will look like because we had to add some outpatient factors, and we will have to input outpatients just a little differently because they will not have an inpatient registrar code. So we had to find another way to do that. We did have to alter a couple of the critical indicators as well because many of our critical indicators were based on a 24-hour patient stay, and an outpatient is going to be based on an hourly stay. So when I talk to you in May, we'll talk more about how that's going to have to happen. But this is just a draft of what the screen will look like. It will already, I know, look a little different because we've been doing some interim user acceptance reviews, and it looks like already that this is quite a bit different. So, but it gives you an idea where we're headed, okay? And then it's going to have a new look for the schedule, so it'll look a little bit more like your Outlook looks today, which will hopefully be better. Alrighty, so we're fixing to get to the end so we can get to some questions, but one of the last things I wanted to talk with you about is the MHS application of WMSNi. We got together this last summer and worked really hard as the Tri-Service Working Group on operational beds and occupancy rates. And we did determine as a Tri-Service Working Group that a constructed bed in an MTF that's currently staffed, equipped, set up, and ready in all respects for peacetime inpatient care was an operational bed. And we determined the way to get at occupancy rates. We made a decision, we briefed it to the MOG, which is the DHA Medical Operations Group, and everybody agreed that yes, this is the way we want to move forward as an MHS, as the DHA, for how we're going to look at occupancy rates and operational beds, separate from physical bed capacity. Remember, we talked about that earlier on. That's a separate subject. We're talking operational beds, which is a staffed bed. So then came the question to us, how do we know that it's a staffed bed? We know in the Army because we have WMSNi. We know because we have a tool, and it's been around for years, and we can show you all the studies, and it's tried and true, and I have data, and I can show you how we know it's a staffed bed. We think that the service corps chiefs are going to make a decision to standardize to one workload and staffing assessment tool for inpatient. I don't know if it'll be WHIMSi, but it may be. If it's not WHIMSi, it just needs to make sure that the concepts that we talked about at the beginning of this presentation are included in that new tool, whatever it is. As long as those concepts are sound and there is a way to make sure that we are able to track the workload in a concrete manner so that it meets all the manpower requirements, then we're actually open to discussion on any and all of that way forward. But right now, WHIMSi is the only thing we have in any of the three services that does what this does. So will all three services decide to adopt WHIMSi as the tri-service tool? We don't know. I'm anxiously waiting to see how that all unfolds, as I'm sure you are as well. But WHIMSi is the only system right now that we have. The Air Force doesn't have one like it, and the Navy doesn't have one like it either. So we will see what happens. Alrighty, so these are some of the references I wanted to make sure you had. These are the subject matter experts I wanted to make sure you knew were around and available to answer questions for you. Luckily, I don't work in a vacuum. I have a great team, and I just love the folks I work with, and these are some great folks for you to get in contact with as well. The websites of interest, I included some of the things in here because you should also be aware that there are a lot of movement out there in the civilian sector. National Quality Forum has a bunch of stuff on nursing care hours per patient day that we're doing across the civilian enterprise. There's a whole bill being proposed to Congress called H.R. 1821, titled the RN Staffing Act of 2013, that I'm anxiously waiting to hear how that finally unfolds. There's staffing methodology for VHA nursing personnel. There are a lot of people looking at nursing staffing and a lot of the components of what we talked about, which is nursing care hours and getting down to the patient's actual requirements and patient demand. Those are the foundations of these things. There is no ratio-based approach out there that you only look at ratios can get at the truth of what you need for staffing. Even if you really read those California ratios, if you really read them, what they say is the ratios are a baseline, core baseline, and then you're supposed to adjust your staffing based on the requirements of the patients. People aren't reading the rest of the message. It is always about the patient care requirements. Alrighty, so let me see if there's any questions that are on here, and I'll see what Sarah and Colonel Wahlberg have for me. So Sarah, do I just start with the first one on here?
Yes, ma'am. That sounds great.
Okay, so under presenter chat.
Yes, ma'am. We have a whole pod of questions for you. Questions for Colonel Salmon, and Colonel Wahlberg has put the first one in there from Mr. Cobbler from Fort Knox.
It looks like Colonel Wahlberg answered quite a few of them. I guess I need guidance on how to answer which one.
Okay, just look not quite in the Q&A pod, but the one right below it. Those are the ones that we've saved for you to answer. Do you see those?
Well, I'm sorry, you guys. I'm looking through the three places I have to look at, and I'm trying to find out which one they want me to focus on. Okay, let me start back on this one.
Colonel Salmon, can you hear me?
So Sarah's already answered back some of them to Fort Knox. They were talking about the operating beds, and yeah, there were 7 definitions. You're exactly right. So we really had to get to the detail on what an operating bed is. That's a great point. RRT and code blue. By the way, in the Dimmer's Eye, under the Dimmer's Eye subtask codes, we have a subtask code now that talks about the RRT. So you were able to put in Dimmer's Eye the RRT requirement, so you can break out that from your normal direct care time. Sarah, did you want to help me?
I think you're seeing those questions that kind of highlight in red in the top of the presenter area. But if you look down in the pod beneath that, it says questions for Colonel Salmon. And Lieutenant Colonel Walberg has pasted some in there that would be good for you to answer. We have not yet addressed those with people. So the point about operational beds, we have not covered that. So you might want to speak to that and then all of the questions that are in that pod. Ma'am, I think we lost your audio and visual. You'll need to turn your camera and microphone back on.
There we go. Did that work? Can you see me now? Can you see me now, Sarah? Okay, excellent. So let me talk about some of the questions that I'm seeing, and I'm sorry I'm not as proficient at this as I had hoped to be. But we did talk about operational beds, and let's talk a little bit about this next question, which Colonel Vincent asked, which is the continuity of operations plan. Basically what she's asking is a question about if the network is down and you're unable to enter WHIMS-I, what do we do? And what happens is if the WHIMS-I is only down for 8 hours or less, there is nothing you need to do except input the patients as soon as your network comes up. It's only been 8 hours. You have 3 snapshots a day that WHIMS-I comes through and captures your workload. Enter your patients immediately as soon as the network comes up, get them in, and you're fine, okay? If your network is down or you have no access to WHIMS-I for a 24-hour period, then what we do is we have to put in a work order to have the USAMITIC folks populate with an average of your workload for that day into the system. Still not good, still not best, but it's all we can do, and at least it gets you some workload for that 24-hour period because we don't want you to have 0, okay? So that's what you have to do if you have the network go down, but you have to tell us, you have to put in a work ticket. It has to be done in all the proper manner. But if it's just 8 hours, then you just make sure you put it in as soon as you can get in. We talked about RRT. The Colonel Guest asked, staffed by HCDP and not TDA. Okay. HCDP is a part of the whole way to look at manpower and staffing. HCDP looks at the military components, but the TDA gives you those slots, okay? So it is kind of both. And WHIMS-I gives you the total numbers, and how that number breaks out into military versus civilian is another whole story. So WHIMS-I gives you the total number on the TDA, okay? Alrighty, so those are the ones I saw there. Oh, here's another one. John Basham asked, how do you apply the inpatient nursing dashboard for those small MTFs who have to have the NBU units open for mission and it shows it may be overstaffed? Okay, so let's talk about what we did with the PBM and IRIS metric, which is probably what he's talking about when it looks like they might be overstaffed and minimal requirements. What we've done is we took a look at all of the MTFs across the enterprise, and we said there are some locations that we have open that are just not going to be efficient. And no matter how we look at it, those nursing care hour requirements on that ward are never going to be enough to justify the minimum staffing of 2 nurses on per shift. There are some locations, you guys, that have maybe 1 or 2 patients a day, and they're not hard patients. So the nursing care requirements for those areas are not going to earn the 2 nurses that are minimally staffed. So we took a look, we did a whole review across the enterprise. We looked at the WMSNi to look at how many hours they had of direct nursing care. And there were 4 MTFs that were identified to be called inherently or permitted inefficient with the PBAM-IRIS metric. Those MTFs today are not being penalized because they were over the 120% goal for staffing. However, they won't be penalized only if they maintain minimal staffing levels. If they should all of a sudden decide they're going to put 4 nurses on instead of 2, they'll be open for penalty just like everybody else. As long as they maintain minimal staffing, they won't be penalized for not having the patient load to earn the 2. The reason for that is we have made decisions across our enterprise to keep those places open over the years that have had little to do with the patient care demands. Maybe they were political reasons, maybe they were because they were the only game in town and it was a 4-hour drive to get somewhere for care. Maybe there were a lot of reasons why we decided at a much higher level that they had to have that service. So they will not be penalized in the inpatient PBAM-IRIS metric for that inefficiency, but they still must maintain minimal staffing, okay? Now, that's not to say they're still not inefficient, because they are. And so we are looking at those areas to determine whether they even need to have, over the years to come, are we going to maintain those inefficient MTFs? And we may be re-looking at some of those previous decisions, okay? What else do we need to talk about? So that's the last one I saw under questions for Colonel Salmon, unless I missed one. Oh, here's some more up at the top. Talking about sitters. Yeah, M2. Yeah, M2 is not my area of expertise, but they do use, the M2 looks at costs being stepped down across the organization. They use GFibs, they use MEPers, they use cost centers, they use those A accounts and those D accounts that I showed you that were MEPers codes to step down the cost of other things like housekeeping and nutrition care and all those other things to show the cost of an organization, and the workload that they use in that analysis are those bed days, minutes of service, and hours of service. There's a different way of looking at that whole costing piece of it, separate break from how WMSNi earns staff. So it is important that y'all know that there are different ways to look at gathering workload across our enterprise. WMSNi is how we gather workload to earn nursing staff. It's how we articulate the intensity of the care requirements across our enterprise. It's used in a lot of ways, but it may not be used in all of the M2 and GFibs and cost accounting mechanisms that I see those subject matter experts doing in East 4 and that kind of thing, okay? Alrighty, so it looks like we've actually covered everything I've got here. Colbert, did you have anything else that you needed me to talk about? It looks like we actually have like 5 more minutes, so. I'm looking, guys. I'm just reading here. I'm sorry about that. Oh, 2.0, yes. We're hoping that we're going to be pushing out WMSNi 2.0 the week of May 22nd-ish. But we really need to make sure that we do the final reviews for the user acceptance testing. I am doing some more interim testing next week with my team where we're looking at what the contractor and the USemitic team have done so far. And if it looks right, if it works right, if it does what it's supposed to do, if so, then we'll pass that module on, and then they'll go to the next module and work on that. Once everything is done, then we're ready to push it out to you. Life will be good. I'm going to be doing the training on the 15th, and at that time I'm really hoping that we'll have all that we need as screenshots for me to walk through everything that you're going to need to know when it hits you on the 22nd. And that way everybody will be prepared. You'll have slides in advance. You'll be able to share it with your night shift, your evening shift, your weekend shift, your people that aren't there as often. That's our goal. So we're really hoping for that third week of May that it will be out there and being fielded. There are some differences. It will look different for you. Luckily though, most of the concepts and the components will essentially be the exact same thing that you're dealing with now, but there will be some changes. And we'll now be able to capture the outpatient and the inpatient environment, which is sometimes, I'm telling you, y'all are going to earn, there are some of your wards that we figure are going to earn 20% more staff because we're now being able to capture workload that you have not been able to capture before. It is going to be huge in some of your areas, particularly labor and delivery. Okay, there are some of you that are going to be very happy to see WMSNi 2.0. Alrighty, and there will be follow-on WMSNi. There's going to be a lot of other things. I think we're going to be doing, not me, but another subject matter expert will be doing Manpower. We'll be talking, we can even do some WMSNi ones if you're interested in going into more details on WMSNi. We're looking forward to seeing a project that the MEPRS folks are working on, which will show pie charts for all those WMSNi areas, showing per work center, what's everybody doing with their time. They can break that out by MTF down to the work center, so we can look at what are our GS doing, what are our military doing, how much training time, how much time are they doing actually, doing patient care. It's going to be very valuable information now that we're getting better and better at WMSNi. When we were just putting 88888s to our work center task code, we were really hurting ourselves. Okay, then it's really hard to say how much time we were really doing in weapons training and all those other military requirements, how much time we were doing in medical requirements for ACLS and BLS and that kind of thing. We now have the opportunity to tell the story correctly. We have got to do so. So we're going to have a lot of those pie charts within the next few months. I've been working with a quality team on that. We should be able to push those out to everybody very soon. And we need to be looking at that stuff. We really do. What are we doing with our time, and do we have the right people doing the right stuff is another question. Okay. Oh, I have another question real quick. The problems we have with having access, system is off and down or has errors, is told that we have to make changes to the schedule before midnight. Unfortunately, the schedule right now in WMSNi as it currently is, it is limiting you to a cutoff. In WMSNi 2.0, and remember I'm still testing it, what we're hoping to see in the module that has the schedule within it is that it's going to allow the CNOIC to go back 72 hours to correct the schedule. The reason we asked for that is because over a weekend things change. And the CNOIC doesn't have an opportunity then to correct things on Saturday and Sunday because they weren't there, or it could be a holiday, or it could be whatever, or they, So one of the things we wanted to do is make sure that limited access only, they could go back and make corrections to the schedule. What we don't want is for everybody to have access to schedule changes, and so that will actually be limited a little more than you're used to today. We have found that right now there are a few places who have had access to changing the schedule a little more liberally than would be preferred. So what we need to do is tighten that up. We can't just have everybody be able to go in and change the schedule. It's caused a lot of havoc. So what we need to do is tighten that and make sure that the leader is the one that's held accountable, responsible, and the one that can go and make changes to the schedule. Okay? Alrighty. It looks like we're pretty much good. Is there any last minute questions before we sign out? Colonel Wahlberg or Sarah Ryan, do you have anything more for me? Tanya, did I catch everything?
Thanks, Colonel Salmon. For the questions that you answered,
Looks like we're okay. Oh, I've got one more.
After the presentation,
How will we know about upcoming presentations? It looks like Sarah Ryan's got a wonderful process for notifying people in advance, but she aims for Thursdays, I've noticed. And again, I'm doing one in May, on May 15th. Sarah puts these out in advance, and with the WMSNi 101, the little papers that that we have to submit. So the next ones that are coming along, I'm sure Sarah will let you know. Oh, there she goes. And she's also giving the presentation a YouTube video address, so that anybody who wants to look at this at a later date or show your staff or have any of your staff look at it, they can watch the YouTube video at their leisure. This is especially useful for those of you that work night shift or that kind of thing, because sometimes you just can't be at every single thing on a Thursday afternoon. Okay, well, thank y'all very much for your time, and I really appreciate y'all coming. This is an exciting topic to me, and I'm hoping it is for you as well.
Thanks, Colonel Salmon. And thanks for the questions about how you can learn more about our upcoming sessions. So as Colonel Salmon mentioned, she'll present a second session on WMSNi 2.0 on 15 May, a Thursday, at noon to 13:30 Eastern Daylight Time. And for those of you who track the Aspire calendar, it's posted on there. It will be at the same URL, so join us here in about a month. The video for this will be posted on YouTube. I'll try to get it up late Friday, so maybe look for it by Monday on YouTube. So any of your colleagues that should watch this or might be interested and didn't join us today, please direct them towards that recording. And finally, just a reminder to download that certificate and use the function within Adobe to click the submit button and send that back to me. That will ensure you get on our distro list and you get those invitations straight from our Outlook calendar. And again, we'll hang on for just a couple minutes. We'll turn off our cameras and our microphones, but if there are any other questions that come in through the Q&A session or the Q&A pod, we'll hang on and answer those and write up the answers to the questions that Colonel Salmon addressed verbally. So thanks everyone for joining us today, and we hope to see you again for WMSNi 2.0. Thank you, Colonel Salmon, and thank you, Colonel Wahlberg. You guys did a great job.